Welcome to the many interpretations of Kentrosaurus. Kentrosaurus is a stegosaurid that lived in the late Jurassic around 152 million years ago in what is now Africa, more specifically Tanzania. And it's a pretty cool little fella. As far as like stegosaurids go, Kentrosaurus is probably one of the most popular. I don't really have much else to say in this intro, so we'll just get right into it. We'll start off with the Land Before Time, as we see a Kentrosaurus in the background. That's pretty much the extent of it. You don't really get to see it in action or walk around or talk to anybody, and it looks like this. Overall, it kind of looks pretty good. Like it has a decently long and thin neck, which is something that Kentrosaurus likely did have, a relatively small head, and a beak on its mouth, which is obviously something that Kentrosaurus also had. It also does have plates on its back that lead into these sort of spikes. All of those are, of course, osteoderms. And actually, going into this, the exact layout of these osteoderms is not quite clear. Most do agree that they looked like this, though. You had like two rows that, like, they start off as plates and then they shift into spikes as they go down the animal's tail. One thing that is lacking here, though, is the shoulder spike. Most modern reconstructions will reconstruct Kentrosaurus with a shoulder spike on either side. Again, the exact placement of that is not quite known, but most seem to be in favor of it being on the shoulder. That's something that's not present here, so that is a difference. But that's a pretty good start. So yeah, let's continue the list and go on to Dinosaur King. This one also looks pretty darn good with all of the traits that I mentioned before. The proportions also seem to be they seem to match up to Kentrosaurus pretty well. And again, you do have those plates that shift into the spikes, and this time you do have the shoulder spikes. Again, the relatively small head is present, and the colors do seem very cool. I quite like the colors, and it does very much look like a Stegosaurian. After that is Dinosaur Train. Aside from it being a little bit stylized for the show that it's in, it still does check all of the boxes that I've been talking about previously. Maybe the neck is a little bit too short, but again, it is a stylized show. And also the shoulder spike is not quite on the shoulder this time around. It's actually shifted a little bit more towards like the torso, like further down on the torso, closer to the stomach. Again, we don't exactly know the placement because, of course, those are osteoderms. Osteoderms are bones that grow in the skin. They're not attached to the skeleton, so you can't really figure out the attachment points on the skeleton. It's always like a difficult thing. I mean, the same problem existed for Stegosaurus. There used to be a lot of problem trying to figure out the exact orientation, like the exact layout of its plates, until eventually there was like a Stegosaurus specimen that was found that was kind of like laying on its side. And fortunately, the plates were still present where they would have been when the animal was still alive. Like they were still in that sort of like alternating, that double row that you see in most modern day reconstructions. So Stegosaurus, we got pretty lucky and we were able to figure out the exact layout of their plates. I don't believe we were that lucky with Kentrosaurus. I think a lot of its reconstructions are based off of dinosaurs like Stegosaurus, with that double row of plates that again lead into the spikes. But things like the shoulder spikes, that's of course unknown. After that is Ice Age, and when I saw this movie, I always assumed that this was a Stegosaurus. In fact, I wonder if did I include it in the many interpretations of Stegosaurus video? Let me check. No, it doesn't look like I did. That's good. Dodged a bullet with that one. But this is what it looks like in Ice Age. Again, it's stylized for the movie that it's in. It's not going to be incredibly paleo accurate, but it does have its plates, it does have its spikes, and it does have like an overall Stegosaurian build and a relatively long neck, as well as a proportionally small head. It does lack the extra spikes that you would find on the body, which again are mostly agreed to be shoulder spikes. Dino Dana has a very good looking one. Like, I really like the way that it looks, especially with its proportions. It actually looks very accurate, all things considered, especially the way that the tail is raised off the ground. Most reconstructions of Kentrosaurus I see, they do have it kind of raised up like this, where it's like really solid, and then it kind of like droops down a little bit because, of course, it does have those osteoderms kind of like weighing it down a little bit. The legs seem to match up. The head looks very much like a Stegosaurian head, and it's really cool to see how pronounced the spikes are. So this is a very good depiction that I really do like. In Jurassic World, Camp Cretaceous specifically, we are introduced to Pierce, who is named Kentrosaurus. Overall, it kind of matches the Jurassic Park aesthetic, as in it looks a lot like the Stegosaurus, of the same franchise. Obviously, there are quite a few differences between Stegosaurus and Kentrosaurus. Kentrosaurus, for one, is significantly smaller than Stegosaurus, and overall, I'd say that Kentrosaurus is a bit thinner than Stegosaurus would have been. And also, the biggest elephant in the room is the fact that Kentrosaurus has way more spikes than Stegosaurus has. But of course, we do see all of those spikes being present here. It's just the body that mostly looks like a stegosaurus. It has a very short neck that probably should be a little bit longer. The head might be a little bit too big, but that aside, and aside from the elephant feet, it looks pretty good. You know, it's got the shoulder spikes, it's got the spikes at the end of the tail, and it has the plates. So it's a decent depiction of Kentrosaurus. It's just all around a lot bigger than it likely should be, or well, then, you know, a more accurate depiction would be. We'll move on to the video games after that, and starting off with the Jurassic Park video games. We have Jurassic Park 3 Park Builder right here that it's kind of difficult to make some of it out, but I think that like the shoulder spike is a little bit closer to the neck, which is an interesting little detail I noticed. Jurassic Park Operation Genesis, oddly enough, this kind of looks like a really old like paleo art, like, you know, something you'd see that Charles R. Knight did, and the way that it kind of like it really slopes up and then it kind of slopes down almost to the point where its tail is dragging. It has all of the spikes and it has all of the plates. It's just the body proportions remind me of really old vintage paleo art. Jurassic Park Explorer, it seems like they got the size pretty good. This is pretty accurate to the size that Kentrosaurus would have been in life. But once again, the proportions seem to match up to the Jurassic Park version of Stegosaurus more so than like an actual, you know, Kentrosaurus. So it's not too distinct in that way. But spikes are here, plates are here, most things are here. I don't think it has any like shoulder spikes or anything like that. Jurassic World the game has one that I really quite like. Like they kind of they captured it pretty well. I think it seems to be smaller than something like Stegosaurus. The spikes are really spiking and the plates are really plating. It's just short neck once again. And of course, you know, the more that you level it up, the more exaggerated certain traits become. I haven't talked about that in a while, but level 40 Kentrosaurus looks a lot like this. Kind of looks like it has some, I don't know, armadillo, like an armadillo osteoderm going on there. Now we have Jurassic World Evolution 2. So this is like Frontier's unique model of Kentrosaurus, like the one that they made beforehand. And of course, this is Pierce, you know, the alternate skin that you, or the alternate model that you can place into the game. One that is a lot more accurate to, you know, Pierce's, or like the Kentrosaurus's on-screen appearance in the franchise. So I prefer Frontier's model. Frontier's model seems a lot more true to Kentrosaurus in its size, in its overall proportions. It's not nearly as bulky or rounded. The plates seem pretty good on both of them, and you know, it's got all of the traits that you would expect, similar to how Pierce does. But they also do have like what seem to be like kind of proportionally longer and thinner necks compared to what the Camp Cretaceous / Chaos Theory one does. All around, I just think that they, oh my, overall, I think that they're better. I think that they're certainly a lot better than, that's not to say that this one's bad. You can still very much tell that this is meant to be Kentrosaurus, and, you know, that's pretty good in my eyes. You know, if you can tell what an animal is meant to be, then that does check out. But these just look more like Kentrosaurus, if that makes sense. Their little heads look pretty good too. I like them, although I can't really tell if these guys actually have, I can't tell if these guys actually do have beaks or not, is my thing. Like, you have a beak, yeah. It's hard to tell if you actually have a beak. I'm not too sure. That'd be interesting if it doesn't, because Kentrosaurus, of course, does have a beak. But anyway, yeah, no, that's Jurassic World Evolution 2's Kentrosaurus. Jurassic World Alive has this fella right here that, yeah, you know, it still matches that Jurassic Park aesthetic, and it has all of the traits that we've been talking about. So that's fairly cool. There's also Zoo Tycoon. We have Zoo Tycoon 1 that has this sort of green coloration right here, which looks very cool. A lot of the proportions seem to match up pretty well. I especially like the way that the neck looks and with the head. And yeah, it's got all the necessary osteoderms, and I don't have much else to say. There's also Zoo Tycoon 2 that has this one, and interestingly, it actually shifts those spikes down to the hips. That has been something that I believe has been proposed before in the past, but it hasn't been like widely accepted amongst people who reconstruct Kentrosaurus. Once again, to reiterate, it is pretty difficult to figure out the exact layout of something like osteoderms, especially when it's like an extra spike and where exactly it would go. I believe most of the time it's placed on the shoulder because that's based off of Gigantospinosaurus, which is, you know, another relative to these fellas. Being placed on the hip certainly is interesting. You don't really see that with pretty much most reconstructions that you see nowadays. The neck is also very short, you know, Might as well mention that too. There's also Fossil Fighters right here. A very stylized game. It's got like overall a lot more robust proportions, and it's just, yeah, it looks pretty cool in its stylized way. It's got all of the spikes, and it's got the spikes on the shoulder. Very cool. And now we have the Minecraft Dinosaur Era add-on, of course, for Bedrock. It's Kentrosaurus. It matches practically everything that we've been talking about. A lot of these designs have remained fairly consistent in their overall body plan, even like the orientation of the osteoderms, as you'll see right here. You have 2 rows of plates that lead into 2 rows of spikes, and that's what continues down the tail, and of course the shoulder spike, which is very common. Let's see if we can. Are there different colors? I can't remember. Yeah, I think that one's like a slightly different coloration. It is, yeah. But yeah, no, it's a good model. You know, I really do like the models in this game, in this add-on, because they remain true to the animal, but at the same time they're Minecraftified, you know. They're very fun. I like them. Next up is Path of Titans, where again everything is very consistent from what most other things that we've been seeing. The body matches up skeletally. The feet also look pretty good. Spikes are present. Plates are present. The head is here. The neck looks pretty good. But what's also interesting is that they actually have like what seem to be feature scales, large scales every so often. Per my knowledge, I don't think we have skin impressions of Kentrosaurus, so I think that's probably just as valid as most other depictions. But this is Ethiopicus, which is one of the only species that we have of Kentrosaurus. Multiscornus, which might be based on another stegosaurid, I'm not too sure. Not much difference in that. And then Parval spectrum, which gives it some quills, which is an interesting depiction. I don't think we have evidence for quills or little bristles, rather. I don't think these are quite quills. They're more so like bristles. But yeah, I don't think we really have evidence for that for Kentrosaurus, but it's a cool little thing that you can just have. But yeah, let's see it in game. Yeah, I'd say that the animations are pretty good as well. Obviously, I have played as this fella before. The tail does seem to be held in the correct position, you know, that being, you know, just kind of up high and then it droops down a little bit. No notes, really. No notes. I think that it's a very good depiction. Like, seriously, I think that Kentrosaurus has to be one of the most consistent dinosaurs that I've ever talked about in terms of, like, media depictions. There's not been too much. Like, aside from mammoths, there's not been a lot of variation. Like, the biggest thing that you can really mention is how some of them shifted the shoulder spikes around. Oh, look at that. See, there we go. It's standing on its hind limbs right there, which is something that it might be possible for Kentrosaurus, like this, with its tail kind of drooping down like that. Oh yeah, and then like obviously it has more, like a little bit more of an upright stance, but it seems to be like possible that they would go in a little bit more of a sprawled stance as like a defensive position, where it's like they'll go down like this and like kind of show off their tail with a thagomizer, and it's like they'd probably stand like this. It also has a very long neck that might have been flexible, so they'd be able to turn around like this and like, you know, look at whatever's trying to attack them as they're just over here just swinging their tail, you know, defending themselves. Just a very, very interesting stegosaurid, you know? The Isle has this fella right here that I really do quite like. It has most of the traits that we've been talking about over and over again. I don't really have any new interesting things to add about Kentrosaurus. Although one thing that I could add that isn't really related to most of the things I've been talking about is that Kentrosaurus probably would be able to like stand up in a little bit of a tripod pose on its hind limbs. It had like these very straight hind limbs that were pretty strong and could have supported that, at least for a short period of time. Like there has been proposals in the past that it can walk on its hind limbs for a short distances, and I think that's based off trackways that have been found of Kentrosaurus, but I don't think there's really anything concrete about that. At the very least, it'd be able to stand on its hind limbs and maybe like look over on the horizon or reach some tall vegetation or something along those lines, which I think is a pretty cool thing to mention. But yeah, I like the way that it looks in the Isle. I think it checks all of the boxes. In Ark, just like the Stegosaurus, it just has like exaggerated osteoderms. The rest of the body looks pretty fine, but you just have these huge spikes and these huge plates that are really, really eye-catching. You know, you definitely do notice that. And now we have Prior Extinction. What can really be said? It looks good. Every time I see Prior Extinction, it always does. Like, they always look like the animals they're trying to represent. Everything looks good here. Even like the feet look pretty good from what I can tell. And I haven't really mentioned their feet, but stegosaurids have very interesting feet as well. The neck looks pretty good. The body looks pretty good. The way that the tail is being held looks pretty good. Some awesome colors. Let's see if I've never checked the colors before, but I know there's some pretty cool colors. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, there's some cool colors here. But we'll go ahead and like see it move around and everything. I just spawned inside, or yeah, this freaking Spinosaurus over here. I'm going over here. I don't need to recreate Camp Cretaceous, all right? But here's what it looks like. And I didn't mention this, but of course the spikes are on its hips instead of on its shoulders. Again, you don't see that too frequently with most reconstructions. Most people will opt to putting it on the shoulders based off of other stegosaurids. But I guess it's probably just as good of a depiction as any, given the fact that we're just not too clear with Kentrosaurus. But I will say that it is likely that it's on the shoulders. I don't think that most people are in favor for it being on the hips like that. But aside from that, everything looks pretty good, you know. All the spikes look really good. They actually look like they're layered in keratin, which I think is pretty cool. The body proportions seem to match up pretty well. And again, the way that it's holding its tail looks pretty dang good as well. And yeah, all around, I think it's a pretty fine depiction of Kentrosaurus. Paleopines, in all of its stylized glory, looks pretty darn good, you know, for it being a stylized game. I like a lot of the colors that you can select for this fella, and I like the way that the shoulder spikes look. I think that's overall very cool. It's a very cool detail. We'll also move on to some like honorable mentions. We have Dinotopia, where we have one that's being used like it's like lending its service to be, you know, a donut holder or a bagel holder. It's just like they use its osteoderms to do that. That's fun. Definitely had to mention that. And there's also Weird and Wild, which obviously always has some really interesting sort of stylized dinosaurs, if the Maiasaura was anything to go off of. And yeah, this is what it looks like. It looks very interesting, I do declare. And yeah, very fun indeed. So yeah, that was Kentrosaurus. A lot of those designs remain fairly consistent, with some of the biggest changes being like the way that the spike on the body is shifted. But a lot of them I feel like got the idea of Kentrosaurus down, you know, in the way that it's like, in the way that it both relates to Stegosaurus and the ways that it's distinct from Stegosaurus. Obviously, a lot of them look pretty similar to like a stylized version of a Stegosaurus, and that's mostly in the Jurassic franchise. But all around, I think that they did a pretty good job. Like most of these reconstructions did a pretty good job at differentiating it from Stegosaurus. So yeah, if you liked this video and you like dinosaur related content, please consider subscribing. I would love to have you on board. Thank you so much to all my patrons and my channel members. You guys are all helping out tremendously. If you want to help support me and the channel, of course, the links for those are down below. But until next time, thank you guys so much for watching and have an awesome day.